introducing the Orthodox, where does one start? Well, perhaps by making a very simple and simplistic point, which may not be obvious to everyone. That is that within Orthodoxy, there is a distinction between the Eastern Orthodox churches and the Oriental Orthodox churches. The Eastern Orthodox are churches of Eastern Europe and the Middle East. The Oriental Orthodox are also churches of the Middle East and those further south and further east. It would be helpful, I think, for people to bear that in mind, because when in my presentation I say Orthodox, from now on, I mean Eastern Orthodox. The Orthodox Church is comprised of a number of patriarchates and self-ruling churches, which share a common heritage, a common theology, a common liturgical tradition. We squabble from time to time, but we're all one. By God's grace, I find myself a deacon in the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate of Antioch, serving in a parish in York, and I also represent our Archdiocese of the British Isles and Ireland as their ecumenical officer. I've been asked many times if I'm Greek or Russian Orthodox, to which my answer is, yes, that's right. An unhelpful answer, which at least gives me the opportunity to explain two things. One, that what is most important is to be Orthodox. And my allegiance within Orthodoxy, though that's important, is secondary to that. I've had the privilege, for example, of serving at a Russian liturgy, of worshipping in Romanian, Bulgarian, Greek monasteries. And in each place I've been told with a smile, welcome, you are at home. And secondly, it gives me the opportunity to challenge a common misunderstanding about the word Greek in this context. This is not a reference specifically to the geographical country of Greece, but to the fact that the church came into being into the Greek-speaking eastern part of the Roman Empire, which is why, of course, the New Testament was written in Greek. In apostolic times, Antioch was the third city of the Roman Empire, and it remained a major city of Greek learning and culture for several centuries. Many of the early luminaries of the Universal Church were from Antioch. St. Ignatius of Antioch was our third patriarch. St. John Chrysostom, whose liturgy is to this day the mainstay of Orthodox worship, a son of Antioch who became Archbishop of Constantinople, and then later there is St. John of Damascus, a very important figure in the life of Orthodoxy. For an early history of our church, you have only to look at the New Testament. After Pentecost, the faith spread quickly to Antioch, and when persecution began in Jerusalem and Judea, when Stephen was stoned to death, many believers moved from Jerusalem to Antioch, including Peter, whom we honor as our first patriarch. It was in Antioch, St. Luke tells us, that the believers were first called Christians. And it was in Antioch that Paul and Barnabas were commissioned to go out and to spread the gospel into Europe. For several centuries, Antioch was really the headquarters of the Christian church. And then things began to change. Constantinople grew in importance, of course, after the accession of Constantine as emperor of the empire. Various theological disputes racked the church. Those of you who are theologians, church historians will know all about those. and they took their toll in Antioch and fragmented the church. And then in the 7th century, the city was overrun by Islam, but it still hung on. There were again troubles and fragmentations and persecutions in more recent times under the Ottoman rule. And then once more in the 20th century, when the Turks drove most of the Christians out of Antioch, including, I was fascinated to discover a few years ago, the mother of a chap called Ibrahim, our parish subdeacon. I met his mother before she died and was able to talk with her. She was a very small child at the time of the expulsion. But through all of that history, the church survived it all. Expelled from Antioch, our patriarchal headquarters is now officially in Damascus, in Straight Street. But as a result of the Syrian civil war, our Patriarch John X is currently based in Balamand Monastery in the Lebanon. His brother Paul, Metropolitan of Aleppo, was one of the 2 archbishops that you may remember were abducted by terrorists early in the Syrian civil war, and they've not been heard of since. The persecutions continue. They've been a mark of our church throughout. Subdeacon Ibrahim, whom I mentioned is of course an Arab. And in this country, people often assume, therefore, he must be a Muslim. No, he says, I'm a Christian, and my family have been Christians for 2,000 years. How many years has your family been Christians? And that usually puts them in their place. Well, now let's turn our attention to the Antiochian Church in Britain. I don't know who the first Antiochian to reach these shores would be, but I do know that in 668 AD, 4 years after the Synod of Whitby, a new Archbishop of Canterbury was enthroned. He was a surprising choice. He was Theodore of Tarsus, therefore born in the city of St. Paul, educated in Antioch and in Constantinople, and he's credited, among other things, with introducing to these shores some liturgical texts from the East. It perhaps therefore comes as no surprise that he was chosen Theodore of Tarsus and of Canterbury to be the patron saint of our Antiochian Archdiocese of the British Isles and Ireland. In much the same way, my home parish is dedicated to St. Constantine of York. Of York, you say? Well, yes, it was in York that Constantine was first proclaimed Emperor of Rome. There's a statue of him outside York Minster, and as they say, not everyone knows that. Our story is like many others within the Orthodox family of churches. An Antiochian church was established in London to serve the mainly Syrian and Lebanese Orthodox Arabs who had come to make a new life in Britain. And until 1995, it was the only Antiochian parish in the United Kingdom. Its worship was at that time exclusively in Arabic. Orthodoxy has, I think, long had an appeal for many thoughtful British Christians, but the practicalities of embracing it were formidable. Does one have to learn Arabic or Greek or Slavonic or Romanian? In any case, nearly all of these churches were in London, impossibly remote from the more civilized parts of the country like Yorkshire. But over the years, significant numbers of British people have indeed found their way to Orthodoxy. In our own archdiocese, we have 26 clergy, and most of them are English. We have 18 parishes and missions, 2 in the Republic of Ireland, and all the rest in various parts of England. And we also have a small monastery in the Shropshire Hills under the care of Archimandrite Philip, who too is English. In 2014, our archdiocese was born. New archdiocese was created to serve the British Isles and Ireland. And in 2016, our first Metropolitan Archbishop, our beloved Silouan Oner, was enthroned in that church in London, now designated as his cathedral. He is a young man, as archbishops go, and it has an interesting background. He is, of course, an Arab. He has a degree in mechanical engineering from Latakia University in Syria, a degree and a master's in theology from Balamand in Lebanon, and a doctorate from Thessaloniki in Greece. And before he came to us, he was abbot of St. George's Monastery in the Valley of the Christians in Syria at the height of the Syrian civil war. All of our new church communities worship in English. So with something similar happening in some other jurisdictions, it's now, I suppose, much easier for British seekers and inquirers to find an Orthodox parish, though it might still take some effort. My wife and I make a round trip of some 60 miles or more to attend church in York, and that is our nearest Orthodox parish of any description. And we are far from being alone in doing that. But despite the difficulties, we have a steady stream of enquirers, and new people are being welcomed, received into the Orthodox Church on a regular basis. And interestingly, they're mostly young people, it must be said. Not only does worship in English make Orthodoxy more accessible for British people, it's also important, of course, for the ethnic communities, because their second and third generation may only speak English. And it has had another quite interesting knock-on effect, because Orthodox churches of any kind are still not numerous. It means that in practice, many of our communities have become pan-Orthodox. After all, the liturgy is the same, and whichever church you visit, it's likely to be the liturgy of John Chrysostom, or on occasions the liturgy of St. Basil. In our own parish liturgy, when we pray the Lord's Prayer, we say it first in English, and then in the language of each nationality present, one after another. This means usually in Arabic, Greek, Slavonic, Romanian, and Finnish. In the past, we have had Georgian and Korean, a visiting Korean professor to the University of York who brought his family. And last week, Ethiopian, because of some visiting Copts. I'm not sure whether they prayed in Amharic or in liturgical Ge'ez. I'm not qualified to know. But it was wonderful to have them with us. And all this from a COVID-restricted congregation of just 25 people or so. I sometimes think that our Sunday worship is a microcosm of the nations of the earth gathered at the gates of heaven in the presence of the angels of God. And it doesn't get much better than that.